Hello again, welcome to beautiful Bridlington on Tuesday the 29th of July 2025, air temperature 16°C. Bridlington, lobster capital of Europe, resort between the areas of Flamborough Head and Fraserthorpe Beach, culture capital of the East Riding of Yorkshire, allegedly. If you choose to visit Bridlington, this is the approach from the West Riding of Yorkshire, from the Driffield end. This is Langdale's Wharf car park, where we usually park. This is a council car park. We use the iPermit app rather than struggle with the parking machines and coins. Langdale's Wharf boatyard. And I think it's worth mentioning the speed limits and speed cameras when you approach Bridlington. Now, approaching Bridlington from the Driffield area, the Driffield Road there, lots of changes in the last 5 miles coming into Bridlington. Speed limit, it almost seems like 40, 30, 40, 50, 30, 60 and so on, 30, something like that. But you've got to be very careful, I think. Because half a mile in the distance you'll see someone stood with a handheld speed camera. Let's be fair, there are plenty of warnings that there are speed cameras, those little signs at the side of the road. But I don't think I've known anywhere where the speed limits change so frequently as they do on the Driffield Road into Bridlington. Now here's Bridlington Harbour, viewed perhaps from a different perspective. Now I'm standing now on the Chicken Run, the so-called Chicken Run wharf. And here we see some of the day trip fishing boats and the lobster pots. Now I remember as a 2-year-old, perhaps in 1950, or it might have been late 1949, being taken onto this wharf to experience it as it was when it was actually a wooden structure. There we have the most important ship in Bridlington Harbour, the dredger, the gypsy race, keeping the harbour free of mud. Without that dredger, the whole harbour would silt up with mud from the Gypsy Race River, which enters the harbour over there just behind these boats. This of course being the fish wharf at Bridlington and the fishing fleet being out to sea. There's one fishing boat over there, the Olivia P, that's tied up. I filmed that on the last trip entering Bridlington Harbour. Now over there we've got the Yorkshire Belle. Looking round there from the Crane Wharf, Bridlington Crane Wharf. Along here you can just see a bus over there. Was a bus there going past. And as I've said before, this whole area used to be different. Before they built the boatyard over there, Bridlington Harbour Commissioner's boatyard, there used to be a river bank there with fishing cobbles pulled up on both sides, pretty much like you would see at Whitby today with the mud river banks there as you go out to the back of the harbour. Interesting old anchor here. Looks like that's been on the seabed for a few years, doesn't it? And perhaps been hauled in. Good shot of some fishing cobbles here. There's 3 brothers over there, the blue one. The third one across is Gratitude. Well, there was a fishing cobble festival recently, which I missed this year, and it's possible to join the Sailing Cobble Preservation Society, I think that's what it's called, and actually go out to sea on one of these classic fishing cobbles from years gone by. Here we have a mallard duck. And some other ducks coming along here. If you're wondering why in salt water, and the reason is right just there, the Gypsy Race River enters the harbour. So this part of the harbour at certain times of the tide will be more or less fresh water. That's the one, Gratitude. With its bigger brother, the 3 brothers here, tied up. Now it's sort of been renovated at some point. Now I remember being on that fishing cobble in 1955, out on a fishing trip. Didn't catch anything, of course. In fact, I've almost never caught anything during my earlier fishing career. As an adolescent, we used to go to Pontefract Park and catch tench in a lake that was full of slime. The rivers in West Yorkshire were, at that time in the 1950s, were absolutely filthy. And basically the River Calder, where we live near Wakefield, basically an open sewer of Huddersfield at that time. Above Huddersfield, upstream, it was pure and clean. After Huddersfield, it was turgid and horrible. And in the early 1970s, I've driven through Castleford, and the River Aire there on a Monday used to foam. There's sort of some rapids at Castleford there, or a weir I think, and the river used to foam, and foam used to blow off the river, and it used to be because it was wash day Monday in typical working class West Yorkshire, of which I originate from, and not from the Castleford area. But there was a tradition even then to wash clothes on a Monday, even though we were well into the era of automatic washing machines, or at least twin tubs. Twin tub washing machines were very popular back in the very early 1970s. Before that, I remember a washing machine with a mangle on the top where you put your clothes through, no spin dryer. And before that, right around late 1949, early 1950, I remember washing being done in what was called a peggy tub, which was basically something like an oil barrel with a thing called a poss, which was something you pushed up and down and washed the clothes. And then there was a mangle, which was considered a luxury item at the time, which fastened onto the edge of a table, and you put your clothes through this mangle, rollers together like rolling pins, squeeze most of the water out. Then the washing would be hung outside, or in fact hung inside the kitchen on a creel, which sort of hung from the ceiling. Of course the whole house was damp at that point. You had a Had a coal fire, no television. Actually, no radio. I can remember no television, no radio in the first 8 years of my life. Again to fishing. Now I know a chap called Ethan, and he now goes fishing on the River Aire at Leeds. Showed me a picture of a massive perch and a barbel that had been caught there, and a barbel in particular, a sort of like well oxygenated water, if I remember correctly. I'm absolutely amazed at what the rivers are like, how pure they are these days compared with my memories. But back to fishing. Yeah, very rarely caught anything. I sort of fish the piers here, not that pier. You see people fishing over there now. I used to fish over there sometimes, and never caught anything really. 1 or 2 crabs perhaps. I used to have a small boat, small inflatable with a small British Seagull 2-stroke. It was the one with the really strong mixture of oil to petrol. A lot of oil in that 2-stroke oil, which of course stopped rusting. The British Seagull engine was great. Possibly saved my life once by starting off Flamborough Head when I didn't have an anchor rope or an anchor. I learnt my lesson very quickly on that one. Soon bought a 150-foot rope to use with the anchor. But yeah, out in the bay there I used to catch flatfish. And that was about it really. Here we have Langsdale's, no sorry, this is Bridlington Crane Wharf, and you can see it's sort of in flood. I can't tell yet whether the tide is still coming in or going out, but most of it there is underwater, the most interesting bits of the structure. What we used to do actually, we used to go and catch crabs. Now that's right outside the outlet for what used to be the old sea latrine. You wouldn't want to be fishing there back in the days gone by, but now of course it doesn't matter because there's no outlet there. Bridlington having made the move to proper toilets like everywhere else, you no longer get sewage from these sea latrines going out into the harbour. In case you haven't seen it on one of my earlier videos, and I've got over 100 videos of Bridlington now, recording Bridlington for posterity. This here, underneath this poster, is the old female sea latrine, and I'll just hold the phone in there. Now that's an extremely narrow entrance. I couldn't go in there. My shoulders would sort of stop me from going in unless I walked in sideways. I asked someone about that a very long time ago, 50 years ago, from Bridlington, and they said it had been made narrow there so that men couldn't enter. Now make of that what you will, that's what I was told. And here we have a cormorant flying over. Cormorant, I wasn't quick enough on the zoom there. We walk along here, we see the Yorkshire Belle operating today. This chap is fishing on the north side of Bridlington North Pier here. Now this area here will be revealed by the tide as a small beach area, and out there you've got the beauty of Flamborough Head. Quite unusual today at Bridlington. There's no wind, the temperature is just about right. I'll just check that again. Yeah, it was 16 C. It feels a lot warmer under the weak sunlight there. You can just hear the sound of the speedboat, which will be entering the harbour soon. It's the school holidays at the moment, that's perhaps why it's so busy early on. And here you can see the tide's actually receding. You can see there it's gone down at least a metre from earlier on this morning. Was the gypsy race dredger, of course, going to dump its harbour mud somewhere out at sea. Where out there is the so-called 1 mile buoy, where the sewage from the town is piped out along the east coast of Yorkshire. I don't think there are any sewage facilities for processing like there are inland. I think it's all piped out to sea at a safe distance. It's a safe distance, but actually it just feeds the ecosystem. Because out there at the 1 mile buoy, there's lots of plankton feeding on the sewage outlet. Because of that, there are lots of mackerel at certain times of year. You think there's something sort of iconic about Bridlington. You can stand on this pier, look at those cliffs, and almost imagine you're actually 17 again, because from the perspective of standing here and looking out at it, it seems as though nothing's really changed out there, and that sort of matches a picture you might have in your mind from perhaps one of the first times you drove to Bridlington, perhaps age 16 on a motorcycle, adventuring out from the West Riding. It almost seems, looking out at those cliffs, that you could sort of turn round, go to your motorbike in town and go back home to where you lived when you were about a 16-year-old. Now here we have the extremely popular pirate ship, which according to I was talking to the chap there, Sean, who's the owner I think, and it used to be actually a fishing boat, and perhaps around the time the white fishing industry collapsed here in Bridlington, a move was made to actually, for this one boat to change to a pleasure boat from being a fishing boat. So what a successful story for Bridlington. Bells sounding from the Yorkshire Belle there. That must have some significance. I wonder what that means. Does that mean 4 minutes to go? I wonder if we'll catch the Yorkshire Belle actually setting off this morning. Actually, I found quite difficult to do. Most of the Yorkshire Belle not sort of operating in winter, of course, and we're away from Bridlington by lunchtime always. And I suspect perhaps most of the Yorkshire Belle's trips occur later in the day. There are usually not many people here at this time of day. I'm looking at my watch, it's now 10:40. But as I said, this is the holidays, school holiday period, and it's a nice day. So you've got more visitors than normal. I've been on that speedboat, and somewhere among all of my videos of Bridlington, I've actually gone on that speedboat and filmed it from being on board, which was quite a challenge because it really shook me about. Well, holding on with one hand while I'm filming, managed to do it. A great experience. As I say, I filmed it on board it, and also I've got a video on the Bridlington section of being on the pirate ship. What that's like, if you wanted to have a look at that, if you're thinking of coming to Bridlington. The only boat I haven't been on in the last 3 years since I have been taking these films is the Yorkshire Belle. A longer ride to Flamborough Head or around it, and I haven't got that sort of commitment in time when we visit Bridlington. but I have been on it in earlier decades and found it to be an absolutely fantastic trip. To go on the Yorkshire Belle in the 1950s, I think it was, and there used to be, well, there were other pleasure boats here as well, similar ones in some ways. I remember the Flamboyant, the Boyzone, the wooden, made out of wood, Bridlington Queen. Before that, there was a sort of a paddle steamer here. And before that, even there was a big paddle steamer here, I think, called the Frenchman, which was a little bit before my time. But on the Yorkshire Belle and ships like it, there used to be a guy playing an accordion. So you'd sort of go out to sea, the accordion would be playing, and this being just after World War II, you know, it was sort of everybody had just, most of the blokes, well, the women as well, had gone through World War II. And here things were approximately 12 years later, and the great relaxation of the time of knowing that that war was over and there will be peace forever. That was the perhaps in some ways restricted thinking of the time before there was more of a realisation of what human beings were actually capable of. Although if you went back in time and look at history, it's all there, laid open for you. And the War of the Roses, other wars and battles like it. Nothing ever really ends, does it? I always thought, and I've thought this ever since I saw the Vietnam War on television in the early 1960s, that dominated TV all through my childhood. In fact, I wondered whether I would actually be called up in that war. But we had a Prime Minister at the time, Harold Wilson, who had the great foresight not to get the UK involved in that. Just imagine that. I've always thought that if you can live your life and not be caught up in something like that, you know, you've done very well indeed, really, not to be caught up, called up from a civilian job into a sort of a war setting. Here we have the peace and tranquility of Bridlington. It's supposed to be a sort of a high crime area, though. I looked at a map, I think it may have been in the Daily Mail, I'm not too sure, but the whole of this area here, high crime, but then again isn't everywhere these days. All depends how much you see and how much you're aware of course. I don't think things have changed very much from the 1950s, 40s, 20s and so on. If you go back in time, best to focus on the positives, I think. So here is the Yorkshire Belle. It's still loading up. But yes, there was a generation here in the 1950s in particular and 60s who had gone through World War II and who, coming to Bridlington, was a fantastic experience. It was just before the popularity of going abroad for a holiday, of perhaps going to Spain. In the late 60s, that was just starting to kick off, and in the 1970s, of course, that became the predominant holiday destination for many of us, rather than coming to a resort like Bridlington, where you'd be less sure of the weather. Now, one of the advantages of being older, I'm 76, soon I'll be 77, and I can remember things, and I've got sort of these pictures in my head of how things used to be here. People walking along, you know, the immediate, the war generation. But here, as you look over towards the south shore, and you've got the big wind turbines there, and as you'll know, perhaps the coast curves around there towards Sperm Point. But driving down on the road to Beverley from Bridlington, looking to the left, looking between the Beverley Road and the sea. There used to be mile after mile of military installations of what I think at the time were bloodhound missiles, and these were a sort of a white colour, all pointed upward, all pointed out to sea. And I think that had sort of replaced, we were talking about the early part of the Cold War here, and that had sort of replaced a lot of the military aircraft. And then more time passed, all that was swept away, and now everything has been returned to agriculture. Just outside Bridlington at Carnaby, however, there was a military aerodrome for Lancasters, I think, during World War II, and I learned to drive on that aerodrome in one of those old Austin A40s. I'm talking about one of the original Austin A40s, not the Farina bodied one, with a sort of a column gear change, and a lot of playing the steering wheel. That was my aunt's car. I had to look under the steering. I think my aunt used to drive that car. She used to look under the rim of the steering wheel. She was a small person who was navigating down the road, looking under the steering wheel, and sort of there'd be about 8 inches of play in the steering wheel, because it was one of those worm and nut steering wheels, not rack and pinion. She should be sawing at the steering wheel and peering underneath it. How times change. And here we have the IDJ with its very appropriate British flags. And not the type of flag that unfortunately became associated with something else. Unfortunate that, but not many people wanted to be associated with that afterwards, I don't think. Oh, here we have the Yorkshire Belle casting off. Unbelievable that I've caught this for the first time in perhaps a couple of years. So let's just watch the Belle sail out of harbour, because this iconic pleasure boat was built in 1947. It's 1 year older than me. Twin diesel engines. There we have the iconic Yorkshire Belle. I think the last pleasure ship of its type, certainly operating from Bridlington of that size, heading out towards Flamborough Head, or perhaps even around Flamborough Head. I think it goes a considerable distance on some trips around Flamborough Head. With over on the left there, you've got the pirate ship returning. I mean, it's good to have the choice, really. I mean, you've got the speedboat, a very fast trip. You've got the pirate ship, also a quick trip. And if you want a longer cruise, you've got the Yorkshire Belle. Again, against the backdrop of the white chalk cliffs of Flamborough Head. Well, these are the only white chalk cliffs. The white chalk cliffs further north of here, but heading south, the next white chalk cliffs are on the south coast around Dover there, and going around the coast out towards Beachy Head. Those white cliffs of Flamborough Head are the coastline prior to the ice ages. Sort of were at least one of the ice ages, pushed a lot of glacial fill, sort of you know, soil, earth, other rubble and stuff, and so this entire coastline here is formed of that, and is gradually being eaten away by successive high tides, very gradually over a period of years, decades, hundreds of years. Eventually the coastline here will be eaten away right back to the chalk area, the chalk cliffs and so on, which are a few miles inland. In fact, at some point Hull and Beverley will be actually underwater and swept away. Was a cormorant, but again I've missed it. Well, I caught it. As you can hear from the background noise, not everyone's happy coming to Bridlington. Talking about times gone by, I remember a fleet of, as I've mentioned before, yellow rowing boats, about 100 yellow rowing boats out there. If you can just visualise those as you look at this picture, and imagine it filled with people, a lot of them who can't swim. I mean, I couldn't swim until I was about 10 years old, and then being allowed, no health and safety in those days, being allowed to sort of exit the harbour here and row out. I don't think there are any restrictions on how far you actually went out on these boats. That being back in the day, as I keep calling it, you know, back in the 1950s, but even as late as the mid-1980s, there wasn't a lot of health and safety around. I used to hire a Wayfarer sailboat. At Pugneys Leisure Lake in Wakefield, and you could, I taught myself to sail by reading a book basically, and then waited until there was a very calm day with just a breath of wind, and took one out, and after an hour or so I could sail it. You know, applying theory straight to practice there, and one of the best thrills in life, I think, if you've never experienced it, is to feel the pull of wind getting in a sail, on a sailboat, small one. It could be a topper racing dinghy, which I also used to sail, and you feel the pull of the wind and the bubbles of water, the air bubbles passing, it makes a bubbling sound passing underneath the transom. Quite a thing. However, I used to have be able to rent it with a racing sail, even in a strong wind, and I used to take that out on my own and not use the foresail. It used to be a real exciting thing. But then a lot of people didn't learn how to sail, took them out and sort of sailed them flat out into the jetty there, not knowing how to turn it into the wind and stop it, not having bothered to do that. Eventually, you know, as the saying goes, this is why we can't have good things. Eventually that was stopped, and you had to have a sailing certificate to be able to take a wayfarer out. So I wasn't going to sit through basic classes like that. At that point I stopped, but it was a good run of a year or two in the mid-1980s at Pugney's Leisure Lake with wayfarer dinghies and topper dinghies. My wife used to sail a topper as well. It used to be really good fun. But again, eventually it stopped by people who didn't bother to learn how to sail. And a sort of a wayfarer dinghy is an expensive thing made out of fiberglass, and if you're going to slam it full on into the jetty there, it's going to do some damage. Where I used to go fishing on that inflatable with the small British Seagull outboard. I used to go out to just opposite South Landing there, drop the anchor over the side with about 150 foot of line on it, having learned that lesson terrifyingly a few months earlier off the head itself, and used to catch a lot of flatfish and take them back home, sort of cook them. But they've timed out after a very fun summer doing it. Doesn't everything time out eventually? Before that I did scuba diving training in the British Sub Aqua Club, and that sort of timed out. It didn't time out. It's sort of an enduring interest in photography and cine camera making films. And as I've said before, I used to have a second-hand, a very much second-hand 15-year-old Bell & Howell Sportster, sort of a metal wind-up cine camera, standard 8, and I've been stood at the end of the pier here, age 16. I've been travelled on a Honda 90 motorcycle from our home in West Yorkshire. Used to run, I think it was 30 seconds of film in one direction. You have to, maybe it was 45 seconds actually, then you had to take it out and turn it over and run the other side through. Of course, this was no sound at all involved. Flickering images of which I still have in my mind, but which never actually got transferred onto alternative media. They also took some videos with the early VHS video cameras, of which I had one. Was a great big thing, you know, and that sort of languished on VHS tapes for 20 years or so. I managed to salvage some of that by purchasing an old well actually I got it from the VHS tape onto discs, and at some point it languished on discs then for another 10 or 20 years. Managed to rebuy an old second-hand DVD player for £10. They were obsolete by this time, about 10 years ago, maybe longer, 12, 13 years ago, 15, and sort of played this onto the television screen and then recorded it onto my iPhone from the TV screen. I found it very interesting that if you actually do that, if you've got some sort of old video that you've converted and got it onto somehow onto a file on your phone, to actually redo it and re-enter that video into the Apple movie sort of app, or in my case it was the InShot app, and that sort of applied HDR onto the this old video, which had already gone from VHS tape to a CD, a DVD, sorry, and from that onto a file, transferred onto an Android phone and then onto an iPhone. But redoing it, putting that sort of film or video clip, if you want to call it that, again through one of these apps that does HDR, you could actually convert it into HDR, and it's a lot brighter. So I can play that video back now, and it's a lot brighter than it was when I first transferred it from the VHS. I just thought I'd mention that because it's a way I think of rejuvenating sort of an old film. So just to put that, try putting it through an app such as InShot. This is exactly where I stood as a 16-year-old. There was a yacht coming into harbour, I remember it. Don't remember much else. Motorbike under 90. It would do 60 miles an hour flat out. Used to lay on the petrol tank to try to get it to do 62. Once went to London and back on that, straight into the heart of London at 9:30 AM in the morning. No one around, and back out. That was way before the congestion zones, of course, when you could do that sort of thing easily. Onto the Tower Bridge there, London Bridge, the old London Bridge before it got shipped out to America. And the River Thames was absolutely black. It was like ink, with pollution from further up the river. Now here we've got the Gypsy Race dredger re-entering Bridlington Harbour. And the speedboat, which looks as though it's doing an extra circuit to work out perhaps how to come into the harbour with the dredger there entering already. See from the rear of the Gypsy Race there, it's drawing just under 2 metres of water when it's empty. And here we have the Scenic speedboat entering the harbour. Extremely fast and powerful. And at this point I'll end this video from beautiful Bridlington on Tuesday the 29th of July 2025. Air temperature now is 18°C. So take care and hope you enjoyed this video. Bye for now.